So the next thing now to discuss, we're going to discuss the criteria, the appropriate criteria for going to war, right? So this is going to specifically talk about pre-war events, the jus ad bellum, pre-war events, and the 6 criteria necessary for going to war. Okay. So this is jus, and this is the 6 Okay. The first criteria for going to war is known as a just cause. So number 1 is a just cause. So what we're talking about now with respect to our discussion in battle is this phase here, right? Pre-war. Alright. Now with respect to pre-war, the first criteria for going to war is known as just cause. And what are some examples of just causes? Well, the first example of just cause, the most obvious example that will justify a sovereign nation for engaging in battle, right, for escalating conflict, will be obviously self-defense. Will be self-defense. All right, so the first one, and there's many, but I'm not going to go through all of them. The first one will be self-defense. The next thing that we have to recognize is that in discussing self-defense, there has to be clear grounds, there has to be clear demonstration that a nation has been, needs to defend the sovereignty of its land, right? So for example, if government representatives or government agents or military from another country enter the United States with the intent of killing civilians, with the intent of killing military personnel, right? The United States would be justified in going to war with that nation under the grounds of self-defense, right? We need to defend our technically speaking, domestic jurisdiction, right? The territorial boundaries of the United States. We need to protect the sovereignty of our nation. So that's the first thing. And there's many, and I'm not going to give too many examples. Number two is with respect to a just cause, the cause for going to war. And this one actually became very controversial in the 2008 election between Barack Obama and John McCain. I forget who the interviewer was, but someone was in an interview with Sarah Palin. And in fairness actually to Sarah Palin, there really isn't anything technically, as far as academically, known as the Bush Doctrine, right? It was sort of just like vernacular that journalists were using, right? But she was asked by someone, so can you explain to me what the Bush Doctrine is? And the question, well, what is the Bush Doctrine? And whether or not it was, personally speaking, I think it was poorly phrased, I think it was poorly worded. But what the Bush Doctrine alluded to was a concept known as the Preemptive Strike, right? A preemptive strike. And then the question becomes, well, what is a preemptive strike? Remember, this is going to be a just cause for actually engaging in battle. So the question is, well, what is a preemptive strike? Well, imagine that you have a nation, right? And you have nation A and you have nation B. And they're both sovereign nations, right? And we'll say that nation B is developing. At the time, we'll just go with weapons of mass destruction, right? This is just to jog everyone's memory because you've heard all of these words before, right? So we say that nation B is developing weapons of mass destruction, right? And obviously these weapons of mass destruction threaten nation A, right? They're a threat to nation A, especially if there's already a hostility between, pre-existing hostility between nation A and nation B. If there's pre-existing hostility between two nations, and the second nation is developing weapons of mass destruction, then the conclusion that you can obviously draw is that once these weapons of mass destruction are completed, then they will be used to destroy or attack nation A, right? So with respect to a preemptive strike, in anticipating that attack, what Nation A does is Nation A actually attacks, right? So there's an attack. There's an attack by Nation A on Nation B to prevent Nation B from using weapons of mass destruction, right? And that's roughly what a preemptive strike is. What we're doing in a preemptive strike is that we recognize the necessary conditions are developing that will escalate the conflict, right? Again, peacemakers who watch these videos, and I get, actually, thanks to all the peacemakers watching the videos, I've been in communication with quite a few of them internationally, these strategies can actually be implemented, right? So that if we recognize as peacemakers the escalation of conflict, then you can use various modes of de-escalation theory, de-escalation analysis, international accounts for de-escalating violence and conflict to prevent a preemptive attack. That's neither here nor there. That's not part of this discussion. What is part of the discussion is that preemptive strike is another aspect of the just cause. You will be justified as a sovereign nation in engaging in battle if you have valid enough proof, valid enough suspicion to believe that Nation B is developing weapons of mass destruction for the purpose of attacking Nation A. Despite the fact that Nation B has not attacked Nation A, you are justified, according to this theory, in attacking Nation B in sort of a preemption to prevent, your own destruction. Now, whether or not I believe this is not necessarily relevant, it's more important to me that at the end of these videos you have a better understanding of the concept. Okay, so just cause is number one. Number two that we can talk about is proper authority. Number two is proper authority. And basically all this says is that state officials must have proper authority to engage in battle, right? Whatever the measures are for that state or for that nation, they must go through the proper chains in order to actually engage in battle. So if congressional approval is required prior to battle, then congressional approval must be had. If agreements are required between Parliament and the local sovereign, then that must be had. Whatever the rules are, right? Whatever the proper channels are, those engaging in battle must seek those proper channels prior to engaging in war. Remember, we're talking about a pre-war state. So once all of these criteria has been satisfied, right? If we feel that as a nation, a threatened nation, that we need to defend ourselves or that we need to preemptively strike, then we can check off sort of this criteria. Yes, we are justified by cause. If we've gone through proper congressional channels, if we've gone through the proper sort of bureaucratic work and regulations in order prior to going to war, right, then we can check off this one. And after we've checked off all 6 criteria, then obviously you will have engagement, right? Battle will commence.